So today's topic is how to remember past lives. And in science and religion, this topic has always been argued. Some religions and some cultures accept it fully, and others reject it. In science, there's many that reject it, but there's some scientists out there that actually say they've interviewed enough people with personal accounts that line up with certain events and certain evidence where they say it's more likely that there's past lives than that there's none. And there's other scientists that say there's completely 100% no physical evidence. And they're right. It would be very hard to prove past lives through complete physical evidence. But there is a complete scientific method, an exact method that we can use so we can experience our past lives for ourselves. Do not have to rely on physical science. So the question always comes up, why don't I remember my past lives? Or if we do have past lives, why don't I remember anything before birth? Or what happens after death? These are really unanalyzed questions, very superficial questions. We can take the quote from Steiner that says, "It is often asked why we do not know anything of our experiences before birth and after death. This is the wrong question. Rather, we should ask how we can attain such knowledge." So why can't we remember? Sometimes people try to argue this topic, and that's the question they always come up with. But if you can't answer a question, then let's bring up a question we can answer. How far can we remember back? It's an easier question and more logical and something we can measure. If we look back and we just go, all right, how much do I remember of yesterday? Or let's say this time last week. And we shouldn't use our memory in a mechanical way of saying, oh, well, I woke up at 6 in the morning, ate breakfast at 8 o'clock, I drove to work, got there at 8:30, did this, this, and this, left at 5, went to the gym, went to sleep at 10. And that's how we use memory now. We measure it by events. But we should look at the imagination. Do we see the scenery around us? Do we observe how our state of mind was, or emotion? And let's go from there. Now, do you remember what happened yesterday? This time last week? How about last year, this time? 10 years, 20, childhood. Most people have a few memories from childhood, but I remember talking to someone who says, I don't remember anything from childhood. Well, if you took this same question here, what they said before, well, how do I know if I don't remember past lives, how do I know I even had it? Well, if you didn't remember childhood, how do you know you were a child? If you want to take that same theory. And this is very telling of ourselves. There's something within ourselves that's not observing, is not aware. And what do we say when someone's not aware or attentive? They're unconscious. They're asleep. And this is the exact problem that we have. As explained here, it is clear that people do not remember their past lives because they have the consciousness asleep. If people had their consciousness awake, it is obvious that they would remember the former existences. This is Samael Bior and Gazing into the Mysteries of Reincarnation. All people want to see, hear, touch, and feel the great realities of the higher worlds. People want to remember their past lives, and they talk to the gods. But unfortunately, as I said, people have only 3% of the consciousness awake, and 97% of it is asleep. And that's Samael Bior, Questions About the Past. It was a Q&A. So really, if we want to change as an individual, or we want to remember past lives, we need to fundamentally change. And since we're in the new year here, and the holiday of Christmas just passed, I figured this would be a good topic to briefly talk about, to get a better understanding of how we should change. So here you see the old man passing on new responsibility, new knowledge to the newborn child. And this picture here is showing the turning from 1894 to the new year of 1895. This was a part of a newspaper article back then. That old individual is Kronos, or Saturn in Greek mythology, which is the god of time, the god of death. In esoteric astrology, the planets are aligned where Saturn's the last, the seventh planet. The moon is the first. And here the child is represented as the moon. As well as the new year, we see the holiday that just passed of Christmas. Christ comes into the world to bring new light. But what's interesting about that, if we look at the seasons, we see we have spring, creation, it's new things come about. The summer sustains that life. And then the fall, that energy begins to start to be taken away from life, and life starts to die. And death, that death is sustained. Days are short, days are cold, and they're dark. And then around the 25th of December, and at least in the northern hemisphere, that light starts to, the sun rays, start to focus more on the north, begin. And we start to have longer days start to come. The warmth is coming soon, and spring is coming soon, showing that there's new light coming to the world. It's representative of Christ, at least physically, is showing the birth, the new coming in. But that couldn't happen without Kronos, without death. Kronos is an aspect of Christ. People think Christ is of life, but Christ couldn't come into the world without death. This same aspect has to be born within us as well, internally. If we want true change within ourselves, we have to make room for that aspect of Christ, that new life. So how good does a room feel when you throw away stuff and you organize it? It feels very free. It's the same idea. We have to remove those aspects. They have to die so something new can come in. If we just take the same junk we got in the room and just arrange it, well, nothing new is really going to come in. So if we just try to arrange our personality so it just changes a little bit, that's not really the idea. We'll still be the same person, just dress a little better. So it says, there is a small space of free will, but it's very small. Imagine for a moment a violin inside its case. There's very little space for that violin to move around. That is like the space our free will has to move in, which is almost nothing, so that there is only small space of free will, almost imperceptible. Yet, if we know how to use it, then it's possible for us to transform ourselves radically and become liberated from the law of reoccurrence. But it's necessary to know how to take advantage of it. And that's what we're going to talk about. So really, what's the purpose of knowing past lives, and why do we have multiple lives? Again, we should try to take that question and break it down. Let's take something simple. What's the purpose of this life? The purpose of this life is to be a true human being, where we can see, reflect, and interact with the cosmos, the divine. With multiple lives, see the world as a school. Most people look at life, physical life, and try to accomplish it in itself, meaning they try to accomplish physical life as a whole. Not really as a school, but as a goal. And that's great for this particular life, but that's not sustainable. That will come and go. Ones that follow this are actually following the path of the nihilist. Nihilist says, I don't have any past lives. I don't remember anything from there. No one knows anything after death. It's probably nothing. So therefore, I only have this life here. Have as many experiences, let's indulge in it, as many pleasures, become as wealthy as possible. Just look out for myself. It's that saying that everyone says now, we only got this life, live it to the fullest. And this is really a complete lie. It's complete trickery. But then if we go to the opposite end, we see the eternalist, someone who maybe a glimpse of their past life or has heard about these ideas and says life goes on forever. We have as many as we need, and that we'll just evolve to angels. We'll become perfect in the future. And this is really just wishful thinking. Because if you look at the world, it's pretty obvious that if we're evolving, it's not towards divinity at this moment. The scriptures don't talk about this at all. It says that we need to change. It's the middle way that we have to look at. It's in between the nihilist and the eternalist that Gnosis and all the religions talk about. Because yes, we have multiple lives, but it's limited. In Buddhist and Hinduistic texts, they talk about the 108 lives that we have. That we come into physical life and we have 108 of them. Some of this number can be symbolic, and there is some literalness to it. This has always been depicted by the Buddhist necklace, which they have 108 beads, or some that use human bones, 108 human bones, to represent that death, to always be aware of it. And if you look at present humanity right now, it's on a path of degeneration. When things are degenerating, it means that they're at their end. When a plant doesn't produce fruit, it's burned in order for the new season to come. Now, this isn't something that should worry us. This is just how nature works. It tries to produce a fruit, and if the fruit doesn't come, the farmer has to prepare the land for the new. So in the Buddhist texts, a lot of times, they're always very concerned about this current life because they never know. Like a nihilist, they don't know, hey, this could be our last life. Or if it isn't, how do we know we're going to have the same circumstances as we do now? For someone that's very concerned about their spiritual path and moving on, this is a very big deal. They want to make sure they're producing the right karma, the right actions, so in a future life they can continue the work. Because in the next life you don't know if you'll be in the same situation or you'll have access to this type of knowledge. So again, we want to see both sides, we want to stay in that middle. But why do we have multiple lives? Like I said, a lot of it has to do with energy. To take life as a school for the soul, and we have many chances at it. One of the simplest ways to explain it is the law of conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, but may be changed from one form to another. So if you take, for instance, a simple example, if you become frustrated with someone at work, family, and that little bit of frustration builds into the next day, something a little bit more, you think about them more. So a few weeks later, it's becoming more obsessive in the mind. Now that person's actually kind of getting that you maybe don't like them. And then let's say a few months later, I'm sick of feeling this way, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm just going to forget about it. And you change. Now you're not annoyed with that person anymore, but that energy you put into play is still there. That person now is acting weird. They're awkward. They don't know how to act towards you. They think you don't like them, but now you don't mind it. But you had put that karma into place. And this is what the Bhava chakra, you can see the wheel becoming, is showing. That energy has a sort of inertia to it. If we don't change fundamentally, this inertia just keeps us running around the wheel. And this is one of the reasons we have multiple lives, because the actions we put in place today affect tomorrow or affect the next life. If we truly want to know what happened in our past life, it's not so hard, because if we look to yesterday, are we that much different compared to a year ago? Not all that much. Certain circumstances have changed certain aspects of our life, but we're basically the same person, because human beings were very mechanical. So if we want to know what happened in previous lives, just like in our life now, it's most likely the same. Of course, different circumstances and different places we lived are going to change. But if we really want to fundamentally change this, the main exercise we need to do is the retrospective exercise. And this is the basis of learning how to do past lives. Even though this is only one paragraph, there's a lot in here that needs to be explained, and we'll explain in more detail and the reasoning behind it. So there is a simple system for remembering our past incarnations. This system is the retrospective exercise. The discipline lies in his bed every night and then practices retrospective exercise. The discipline begins by remembering everything that happened 1 hour before he went to bed, 2 hours before, every moment of the afternoon, in the morning, throughout the day. The discipline makes an effort to remember everything from yesterday and the day before. One must do the effort of remembering everything that happened during 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 1 year, 10 years, 20 years behind, until minutely remembering the entire history of his life. That's Samayon Vior, Beyond Death, in the chapter of Reincarnation and Karma. So there's a lot there, and so we'll just break it down and give a background of why the exercise is like that. So the retrospective basically is, we look at our life, we look as the day passed, and we review it. What we did wrong, what we did right. Just a basic analysis for the most part. In meditation, though, we want to look at the day and see it like watching TV. The events just passing by as they come by, making no judgments. We run into an area where we're like, you know what, I don't like how that went. Let's take a better look at it. You can take it from your point of view, you can take it from another person's point of view, or you could step back and look at the whole scene and analyze it. Imagine how you can do better. This is the basics of retrospective exercise. In order to do that, though, we need an imagination. We need something that is not a fantasy. Because what we think of imagination now is someone that we go, oh, that person's very imaginative. Usually that person's just got wild ideas and they're just everywhere. Some people that are very imaginative, unfortunately, their lives can be pretty chaotic. But real imagination is what builds the world. For someone, an architect, as mentioned in this quote, needs to put plans together, needs to have some sort of inspiration or some emotion, and then thinks about it with its intellect, how this can be done. Imagines what it, let's say a bridge they're going to make, or a house. They make the plans, they find the materials, and they put it together. It says here, the first thing that an architect who builds a house does is to create the project mentally. He constructs it in his mind, projects it on a plan, lastly crystallizes it materially. Thus, every building first existed in the mind. Nothing can exist in the physical or material world in which we live before having existed in the world of the mind. So someone gets an inspiration, they use their intellect, their will and energy to bring it into physicality. In order to do that, someone needs a conscious, imaginative memory, not a fantasy. And to do that, we work with meditation. Meditation properly carried out opens the way to such knowledge. Meditation brings to life memories of experience that lie beyond birth and death. Each of us can attain this knowledge. Each of us possesses the capacities to see firsthand what true mysticism, spiritual science, anthroposophy, and Gnosis teach. We have but to choose the right means. Only a being with ears and eyes can perceive sounds and colors, but even the eye can see nothing when the light that makes things visible is lacking. And that's Rudolf Steiner. Therefore, if we develop efficiently the faculty of imagination, we will not only remember your past lives, but verify in a specific way that I am didactically expressing here with complete clarity. That's Samayon Vior, analysis of the mind. So we need an imagination that can see clearly. But in order to do that, we need to be able to control it. So meditation is something that people nowadays have a really, even though it's a popular word now, I say, I talk about meditation. They say, oh, mindfulness, or this or that. Really, people have a very vague idea to what that means. A lot of the scriptures on meditation, especially Buddhism, talks about it very plainly. One of the first things they say is to receive information. And then they break it down into two aspects. Some texts will say serenity and insight. In Hinduism, we see shamatha and vipassana. So shamatha is the concentration aspect of meditation. It's also called tranquility meditation. Or in other words, like I said, serenity. Now, this is interesting because nowadays when we think of concentration, we think of let's get a cup of coffee and let's really try to focus and force the mind to look at something. In reality, this is the type of abuse of the mind. We're forcing the body to focus on something purely on our will. But if we imagine meditating and we look at a candle, at the flame. We open our eyes, we look at it, close our eyes, and imagine that flame there. And then if we lose the picture, we open our eyes again, look at the flame, and then we close them again. Concentrate on just that image. We're controlling the imagination to focus on one thing. And with time, we're able to see the flame without even opening our eyes. And if we expand that awareness, we can see everything around us. We see the room. This is something that's actually a type of direct perception. And someone who has not done this, this seems very foreign and very mystical. But really, it's very scientific. Once it's experienced, it makes complete sense. So we break shamatha down. It's sha, means peace. Mata, dwelling or stability. Shamatha, to dwell or to be founded, to have establishment in peace, to dwell in peace. Calm abiding. Shamatha can be broken down into 13 steps, which I'm not going to talk about. There's the whole course on this on glorian.org. But the second aspect of it is imagination, or you could say insight, or a word we're more familiar with is knowledge. But it says V comes from Viesa, which means special or superior. Ashana, to perceive. And to perceive the superior, to discriminate of phenomena. What's interesting is here, the defining imagination is discrimination. We don't think of imagination now as discrimination. We think someone's very imaginative, they just let their mind flow wherever. But here it's saying we should be discriminate of the imagination. So when you're using concentration on that flame, you're trying to control the imagination. You're trying to extract the knowledge out of what's there. And same with the retrospection. We need to be able to control it so the mind is not going everywhere. Because when we start beginning to look at the day, the mind just wants to go here, there, everywhere. But we need to extract. So how is this practiced? Well, let me just read the first quote and I'll go into this. Allow no day to pass without reviewing in spirit, with the eye of the spirit, the important events of his day. The best moment of this is the last moment we pass in the waking state. In other words, the moment immediately before sleep. If we are able to spend 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes filling ourselves with the day's experiences, allowing them to pass before us in an objective series, then we'll do much to enhance the astral body. And this comes from Steiner. These 4 quotes will come from Steiner. So why are we reviewing the day? What's the point of the retrospection? If we take a look at our dreams are a reflection of what we've done in that day. So what the psyche is trying to do is it's trying to keep balance. It's looking at all the chaos and everything that's going on, and it's like, let's try to keep the mind together so it could function. This is very similar to the human body, the physical body. We receive different viruses, different bacteria, different toxins, nutrients. And it just tries to keep balance. How can we keep this body healthy enough so it can function? If we feed it, obviously, a bunch of toxins and everything else, it's just going to go, what do I do with this stuff? Well, just put it over here. And eventually that body becomes sick. But if we eat healthy, the body is free to do other things. Think, heal itself in certain areas, move better. It'll just function better in general. The same thing happens with our psyche. At night, it receives a bunch of information, and normally a bunch of crap, and that we are trying to work with. So at night, it tries to organize all these different thoughts and feelings, just so the psyche can work throughout the day. It can keep it together. And if this starts to become overrun, we start to see mental sicknesses, depression, anxiety, whatever it may be. Because there are situations in life where the mind can't deal with it any longer. Because what do I do? Well, let's just put it here, because at least we'll be able to function. We'll keep ourselves together. But things start bubbling up. And this is being done under an unconscious way. We can do this consciously through the retrospective exercise, where we review the day through meditation. So even here, which Steiner says, even 3, 4, 5 minutes a day is worth keeping the astral body working and healing itself. So if we do this exercise, we should pick out certain events where we go, you know what, I didn't like the way I felt there. Let's take a look at it. And we imagine that event as if it's like a theater, without judgment. And we go, all right, let's look at this more. How could I have acted better? Imagine yourself doing it better. But we shouldn't just stop with major events. Even look at the unimportant ones. So if we got out of bed and to go to the bathroom, it seems like a very unimportant event. But if we were to imagine that event, how much detail did we really see? Did we see ourselves get out of bed? Did we actually observe the things around us? Or when we reviewed that, was there an empty space? From the point we went to the bathroom to the point we were in bed, did we remember anything? If we didn't remember anything, what happened there? Clearly we were asleep. We weren't paying attention, we weren't aware. So if that's the case, why the heck would we remember anything from the past? Or not only our past lives. It says, don't look back on the moment things, but on the contrary, on unimportant ones. And do so from the end back to the beginning. Memory is a bridge which leads us to the invisible chronicle. Now, in Samuel's quote of the Retrospection, he talks about reviewing the day backwards, in reverse, from 1 year to 2 years to 3 years, and keep going back. Steiner mentions the same thing. This reverse review of experiences is especially important for spiritual schooling because it allows the soul to free itself from its otherwise inherent tendency to trace in thought only the course of sensory events. By thinking in reverse, you picture events accurately, but not bound by their normal sensory trajectory. And this is something you need for penetrating the supersensible worlds. This strengthens the imaginative capacity in a healthy way. This is why it is good not only to picture your daily life, but also other things in reverse sequence. For instance, the plot of a play, a story, a melody. So why reverse review? Or if we take a 10-minute nap and we wake up and we had a dream might go, wow, that was an hour long. It's just, that's showing us that the world and the dream world is different than the physicality, the way we think of memory. Time works differently. If we look at the way time works here, we see it in events. Like if you lifted your arm up and extended it, we lifted my arm up and I extended it. That's the way we see it physically. And we see it as consecutive in a sense of time. But if we want to more understand how dreams work, we have to extract that essence of time, because time doesn't work the same way. So with reverse review, we are forcing ourselves to imagine the events backwards. So we're disconnecting ourselves with events itself. As Steiner will say here, by allowing pictures of the day to pass before him in reverse sequence, he creates spiritual images, which he takes with him backwards because that is how everything happens in the spiritual worlds. Thus one finds access to these worlds so that the flow into us more easily and we into them. In normal forward thinking, which bear with us worlds of spirit, we in fact oppose their flow, push them away from us, and therefore obstruct our development and ourselves. So when we start doing this, we go, it can be hard because it's not something we're used to doing. We're not used to looking at things backwards. We're not used to using the imagination as a way to reoccur events, but rather we like to see things in sequence. And what's astounding when this first starts happening is how much we really remember, how much these images start showing up the day that passed. And we start to realize that everything is there, even the minute details. So we just don't know how to access it. We haven't trained the mind to do so. With training, you'll start to see that the day does pass like a theater. We just have to get out of its way. And this only really happens with doing daily meditation. So the memory we have now in the physical world is mechanical. Is what we call recall. When we begin the retrospective exercise, what we run into is direct perception. Because we're reviewing those events and that imagination is controlled, we are seeing what we perceived. To see reality is to look at it and to understand what we really saw, what we perceived into what really reality is. And that's why the retrospective exercise is so important. If all we saw is just ourselves continuously, we are not observing the world around us. Therefore, we're getting a false reality. This is why we don't remember past lives or anything before birth or after death. If we do this enough, we're actually preparing ourselves for death, to be awakened afterwards. If we awaken here and now, with the ability to awaken after death. In this process, we actually lose our memory as we know it. And we begin to see things, so if someone mentions something, we begin to use our imagination before an actually type of mechanical memory. We see things more clearly. We can be pictured in the mind. This is talked about by Rudolf Steiner as well. Everything we call memory is connected with the astral body. The idea you formed yesterday is still there in you, but it has no chance to remain there. If it is not embedded in the astral body, if it does not stimulate resonance that persists, and today, once again, recall your experience from yesterday. Now, it is impossible for someone to make any progression at all in developing his astral body without working to enhance his capacity for memory. I've spoken how we need to work at a strict control of thinking, at mastering the whole of our thought life, of how we need to be clear that our thoughts are real processes, and that it is profoundly untruthful to say that thoughts are duty-free, and that no one can observe our thoughts. Anyone who wishes to develop real capacity for vision has to work with his own power of memory. So really, this memory he's talking about is using that imagination. So that becomes our real memory, conscious memory. An initiate, memory gradually vanishes and is replaced by direct perception of what one wishes to recall. One needs to invoke a precise picture of one's daily experiences with every detail, clearly invoked shirt, face, manner. All very precise, and observe what has happened in the image. How one spoke, what was done, etc. There's very much to do with recalling little things that do not seem so interesting. Things one finds hard to remember, for this stimulates one's inner powers. The power of imagination is formed by the capacity to create such pictures. There's no need to recall absolutely everything, but just to form a very clear pictures. No muscle must be exerted while understanding all this work. And obviously, he's talking about meditation here. So you're seeing here that we're going from something that's mechanical to something that's more direct perceiving. And by doing so, he's actually talking about if we're interested in leaving our physical body, doing astral projection, this is a way of healing it. So this is possible. And he gives a few more quotes on this. On the Tree of Life, the vital body, or you could say the etheric body or the energy body, is pictured here as Yesod. The astral body is on the left as Hod. Makuth is in the middle. So when we go to sleep at night, the etheric body and the astral body, well, really the astral body, departs from the physical. So every night we actually separate from the physical body, just unconsciously, unless you're conscious. And in that moment, the physical body becomes recharged through the vital body, or the etheric body. The astral body still has ego, as we say, or psychological aggregates that still trap the consciousness. And therefore, that's why we have dreams that can be very chaotic. So if we are not arranging the mind and not doing a retrospective exercise, we're actually creating types of formations that we call egos. We put energy into and have some sort of life. that life of those egos is what keeps us asleep. And is always shown in the Bhagavad Gita and different Greek mythologies as actually family, because it's very close to us. But something we need to disintegrate, which was shown by Kronos, as well as the Christ. By performing this retrospective exercise, we can actually heal the vital body and the astral body, as Rudolf Steiner talks about. This is something extraordinarily important. If we do something like this thoroughly, we greatly strengthen our etheric body as well. Picturing whole plays in reverse or stories, other reading matters, is of great importance for consolidating their etheric body. Those who develop clairvoyance on the astral plane can see how a person's astral body changes if he is alert and attends to such exercises for many years. His astral body will start to inwardly organize, where it was once chaotic, a real hodgepodge. You can see grotesquely winding snake-like lines in human astral bodies. Now certain forms arise in it, regular forms, and start to become differentiated. By means of reverse thinking, which is different from the way things unfold in the natural world, we can free the will from the physical and etheric organism, thus connecting the will, which is anyway only a reflection of the astral organism. So you can see that performing this exercise does more than just a kind of superficial way of organizing our psyche. And if we're looking to go beyond the physical, this becomes quite important. So just like I said, a human physical body that keeps it healthy, and we're discriminating about what we put into it, has the ability to do other things. It has free will to do other things than just try to keep the body functioning. As Samuel Vior mentions in Esoteric Treatise of Theurgy, if we lived completely conscious of each of the actions of our daily life, if we comprehended the threefold range of each action of our daily life, if before going to sleep we performed a retrospective exercise in order to become totally and absolutely cognizant of our consciousness in regards to all the events that occurred during the day, then during the hours of normal sleep, we would be absolutely free, as if we were on vacation. We'd move completely conscious in our astral body. We'd act with an awakened consciousness within the internal worlds. So doing this, if we're looking to astral project, if we're wanting to know our past lives, well, we need to make room for that. We need to give the consciousness an opportunity for it to do that. So therefore, we need to free it up. We need to perform the action of reviewing and retrospecting ourselves consciously, so that when we go to sleep, it's not trying to do that for us in those moments. If we're watching horror movies or watching these crazy shows, if we're always looking at Instagram or the cell phone, we're just making sure that consciousness is asleep and just giving more duty to the unconscious to try to keep ourselves sustained. And really, just what's lulling us to sleep. We're not being aware and we're not being attentive. And this is just not for astral projection. When we die, we go through a review. If we were sitting at a table and spontaneously die at that moment, we would see ourselves at a table and then we would review our life backwards, as mentioned here. Under the lunar influence, we relive out life from old age to childhood to birth. The discarnate visit all the places in which they related. They relive each sense of their life, saying and doing the same as they did in life, feeling joy for good works and profound moral pain for the bad. It is clear that when the retrospective work is finished, we have full awareness of the final result of the life that has just passed. It is then, and only then, that all those who are not definitively lost make the decision to correct their errors and pay their debts. The final judgment is what decides the fate of the disincarnate. When the retrospective work is finished, we have to present ourselves before the tribunals of karma. In these tribunals, we have to answer charges. The ruling of the judges is definitive. So if we've been unconscious our whole life and we go through this retrospective reverse review of life, where we relive it after death, we will not be able to make any changes that come along. But if we are in that retrospective aspect and we have some consciousness at least awakened, we can make changes. And hopefully this affects the debts or the karmas that we have built so we can make changes for a future life or whatever it may be. Really, to finalize, I just want to bring on some key things here. Let me read these quotes. If the student falls asleep during retrospective exercise, so much the better. Because in the internal worlds, he will be able to know himself, remember his entire life and all his past lives. In some manner, the medical surgeon needs to study a cancerous tumor before extirpating it. Likewise, the Gnostic needs to study his own ego before extirpating it. Falling asleep or at least being very sleepy during the retrospective exercise is very good, because our imagination will be that much more enhanced. And not only that, you can dive deeper into these events. But it takes practice to not totally fall asleep. You want the physical body to fall asleep, but the consciousness to stay awake. In his Q&A, he says, the student says, I would like to remember my past lives, but since I have my consciousness asleep, how can I awaken it? Follow the path of sanctity. That is the way for awakening of the consciousness. Terminate with all of your errors, repent all of your evil deeds, become pure in thought, word, and action. I guarantee you that your consciousness will totally awaken and you will have reached true sanctity. The retrospective exercise permits us to become conscious of our lunar ego, of our own errors. Let us remember that the ego is a bunch of memories, desires, passions, angers, covetousness, lust, pride, laziness, gluttony, self-esteem, resentments, and vengeance. So just additional practices. The mantra Ram Gaum is very useful if you're trying to remember dreams or past lives. This relates to the peppermint plant, which you can practice with. Peppermint plant allows people to help them to remember their past lives. This can be read in Igneous Rose, the elemental magic of peppermint. Practical astrology, which is, right now we're in Capricorn, which is interesting. Christ was born in Capricorn. And as well, the Saturn, or Kronos, is associated with the astrological sign of Capricorn. You're seeing both life and death within one astrological sign. Also, Capricorn is a month if we want to try to astral project. All these are mixed in. It's not coincidence either. The retrospective meditation explained. I could put these links under. We put it on YouTube on Teleios meditation, the channel there, or you can go to teleosgnosis.org, and I'll bring you to the channel. But I'll put the links there. The retrospective meditation explained is really good to read. It's one of the more practical ones out of all the lectures on glorian.org. It teaches you how to do it, how to eliminate the ego, and so on. I highly recommend. I mean, I took the past life and the reverse review aspect of it. The retrospective is really how to fundamentally, drastically change. That's it. So is there any questions?